gonna be a boy, they said. After all, my mom had already had 3 boys, each of whom were born at 2 p.m. So naturally, I was gonna be a boy, and I was gonna be born at 2 p.m. My dad knew it, but my mom thought something was different. Turns out, I was born rosy pink, and my dad didn't quite know what to do with me. It was the best of any possible scenario. I had older brothers willing to fight for me in anything, and I was the baby. I was pretty spoiled. Growing up, my mom always told me that I was the joy at the end of her train, that I was born to stand out. I didn't need to worry about trying to fit into the world, but that I could just live being who I was, because I was gonna be different. Similarly, my dad always made me feel loved. We would do this thing when I was little, and I'd stand on his toes, I'd wrap my arms around him, and we'd sing Dance with My Daddy, My Little Laddie, as we'd dance around the kitchen floor. We had this saying where he'd say, "You know what?" And I'd pretend like I didn't know so that I could hear him tell me, even though I know the 4 phrases he was supposed to follow with. You know what? You're special. You know what? You're pretty. You know what? You're smart. You know what? I love you. And that's what it was for me. Family was the biggest thing ever. And I felt so loved. In that community, how could I not fail? I had older brothers. I was the toughest girl on 103rd Street. No one else could beat me up. I had parents that loved me and invested in me. And most of all, they taught me to have a really strong faith. Through that experience and their journey, they introduced me to a God that didn't care what I did, didn't care how I performed, but he just loved me for who I was because I was his child. And that was the foundation of my life growing up. It was something that was incredibly important to me then, and something that I began to figure out throughout the rest of life in different chapters and what it would mean to me. Going along with what my mom said, I wanted to make a difference, and I was proud of the ways that I was different. In high school, one of the ways I did this was I would babysit almost every Friday night. Whenever my friends might be hanging out or people at school would gather together, you could find me at some house with a 3-year-old, usually a 3-year-old boy who would tell his mom he wanted to marry me, and lots of kids. I remember one New Year's Eve being with such a sweet family, and we went outside. I told him it was midnight. It was definitely 9 p.m. We beat on pots and pans and pretended like we were so excited to ring in the new year together. And I really was. They gave me so much joy. And after putting them to bed and falling asleep on the couch, wondering how the parents could stay out until 10 p.m., so late, they came home, and we ended up talking for 4 more hours. These were the people in my life that meant so much to me. These families and these relationships. It was there they asked about how I was doing and how I felt, how everything was going and what was hard. And I had all of these deep relationships and ultimately extensions of my family. Yet, looking at those families, investing in those relationships and thinking about mine, I dreamed about one day I could have my own. All I wanted was to be a mom. I looked up to my mom more than anything, and I wanted to have kids. I wanted to be a wife. I wanted to get to love somebody the way that I saw her love my dad. I wanted to be protected the same way my brothers had protected me my whole life. And I wanted to get to make someone a father in the same way that I stood on my daddy's toes and danced with him around the kitchen table. There was only one problem with this. You see, I was at, the very mature age of 13. I thought, I'm practically ready for marriage, so it's about time to start looking for a prospect. Remember, my mom said I was about 30 when I was born. In 9th grade, I prepared for the school dance. Naturally, my mom curled my hair, helped me all day, even let me put on some lipstick. I felt really special. My dad was the cameraman. He had it down, and he knew what shots to take, while my mom told him he needed to include my shoes in every picture. My brother was kind enough in his gym shorts with a very smirk smile to stand in as my double in all of the photos. Looking back now, it's so fun that I was dressed up in my prom dress with my best friend, my brother by my side. dance, I saw everyone else coming in with all their friend groups. My family was my friends, and I kind of felt a little left out, but this was gonna be my time. I was gonna break out, and maybe I'd dance with a boy. But when I got there, I looked at everyone else, and I was really nervous. So I went to the one group I related best to, the faculty chaperones. I ended up talking to them the whole night about mathematical equations and forces behind how the world works. Safe to say I didn't get asked to dance that night, or any night thereafter. Throughout the rest of high school, I began to worry. What was I gonna do? Everyone else was getting dates, and people really liked to hang out with them. I wanted to get married one day, and I knew that I had to start somewhere. So I talked to the person that I thought could help me out, my brother. We were on a drive, sitting in his truck with the windows down in the summer, feeling really cool, because he was a whole 2 years older, and by that time he had his license. I told him, I said, you know, I'm really struggling, because on the outside, things are really successful. I love academics. I'm really enjoying track. I like drama. So many things at school are fun. I even got a part in the play. But I really want someone to love me one day. And I worry they won't. And it's hard for me because when other people might struggle with other things, feeling like I'm not loved feels like an attack on my identity. Like something about me isn't good enough. I remember looking at him that night and saying, John, I just want to marry somebody like you. Somebody that listens, somebody that cares, somebody that's maybe a little nerdy sometimes and tells stupid jokes. But after that night, I knew that I still had a little bit of time. High school ended and college was next. That was my shot. First year of college came and went. At this point, I'm really worried. And everyone in my life starts asking, do you want a boyfriend? Do you want to, talk to people? Do you need to do something differently? And I really started questioning myself. I thought, what's wrong with me? Why does no one like me? Do I have friends? And out of a really broken place, I turned to the one place I knew to, my faith. At that point, started my second year in college, I said, God, you've always been there for me. This is what I want more than anything. And I'm just starting to believe that it won't happen. And on November 23rd, 2013, I wrote this. I essentially wrote a story of a metaphor for how I one day wanted to meet a husband. I said, God, take me to a place where every moment's sweet because you're there with me. We're dancing and there's a crowd all around us. Can it be that all of this has always been for me? Then you showed me. The moment I became so lost and content in you, you whispered, keep dancing, as you joined my hand with another. I opened my eyes and saw him, the man I'd been searching to dance with all evening. And he did. When I finally lost myself and denied the crowd, stepped into discovering my true identity in you, that's when the question fully arose. May I have this dance? God, I pray my ears will be forever open to the music. Let me hear the melody. And when I don't know where life will take me, let me close my eyes as I have all the while and take me where I should go. At that point, it was really vulnerable. It was embarrassing to tell people that this was something I really wanted, but I'd never been able to get, and I didn't know how to do it. The rest of college flew past. Later that year, I remember thinking in so many situations, I wished I had someone to share the moment with. I was a part of this event. I got selected by the university to join the governor in a conference with students from all other universities around the state. One of the things we did, it felt so incredible. I didn't know how many people in the world got to do this. They took us onto a military base, showed us a plane that they fly. We got to go inside the plane, look at all of these gears, and I sat down in the pilot's seat. I remember kind of looking at the people in their uniforms, with their boots. And I thought, I wonder if any of them think I'm cute. Well, they must not have. But I left with a great picture of me with a big smile, sitting in the cockpit. I couldn't believe it, and I couldn't wait to show my brother. At least he'd think it was cool. After that, school went on, and from the outside, I was the most successful person on campus. Awards came and success came, and everyone would congratulate me. But on the inside, I was incredibly broken. I started comparing myself to all these other people. I was looking at everyone else saying, maybe if I wasn't in this leadership position, maybe they wouldn't think I was intimidating. Maybe if I played a different sport, then they'd think it was more cool to come cheer me on. Maybe if I was a little less myself and a little bit more like everyone else, maybe I'd be loved. All the while growing up, my mom had told me I was supposed to be different and that I could own that that was my strength. But I started to doubt it. All the things that I was striving towards didn't make me happy. And so I turned away from everything that I'd always leaned on, and I tried to pursue success. I thought, if I can be successful, someone will love me. I remember being in the homecoming parade, one of 6 members on the court, sitting in the convertible, riding down, everyone waving at me, waving at the little girls on the sidewalks, and thinking, wonder if anyone knows my heart. Wonder if anyone would guess how much I want to be loved. Later that day, I walked to the 50-yard line with 80,000 fans looking on at halftime of the Oklahoma game. They cheered for us, and they announced the Queen, one of my best friends. And I just remember feeling like I didn't think anything was going to be good enough. Maybe something was wrong with me. Maybe I just wasn't lovable. After that, I still had 1 year left. And in my mind, I thought if I left college without knowing who I was going to marry, there was no hope. So this was my year to press in. This was my year to strive. That summer, I took a job in Baton Rouge, right? Hot, gross, and I said, I am never gonna find a husband while I live in Baton Rouge. Well, this summer passed, and don't worry, I didn't. But we got to the end of the summer, and it started to rain, and it actually became the flood of 2017. It was horrible. It covered the whole entire city. It devastated thousands. And I remember as I was driving home, feeling so bad for these people and thinking, I can't believe they're going through this. I'm so thankful that I don't have something like that in my life. Little did I know, in striving for success in this last year, in my life it was starting to rain. And it wasn't going to stop until life as I knew it was underwater. I ran into this last year, thinking if I could win a national championship, that would make me good enough to be loved. And so with everything I had, I poured myself into my sport. But I quickly became frustrated. A small improvement wasn't good enough, and I was irritable. I became somebody that I didn't like. I would snap back at my coach during practice. I would be really jealous of my teammates when they succeeded. I just didn't think it was fair. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to be good. I wanted to win, and I wanted to be successful. And no matter how hard I tried at either thing, I felt like a failure. Throughout this whole entire experience, the year kept getting worse. I spiraled into a state of so much darkness, a place that I loved, I thrived in, I found so much joy in. Now, I'd step through the doors of the track, and I'd cry. At first, I hid it. I wore sunglasses during practice. I didn't want anyone to think I was weak. And then I was uncontrollable. The coaches would pull me aside and say, we're gonna kick you out of practice. And everyone around me didn't know who I was becoming. I remember turning to the only thing that I thought I could halfway through. I was on a trip, on a flight, somewhere that I get really nervous. and I thought, I'm gonna go to God. So November 12th, 2016, I said, tonight as I'm flying home from Washington, D.C., with this empty seat next to me in 22F, I'm longing for a man to fill it. I want there to be someone to hold my hand, put his arm around me, and reassure me that through every bit of turbulence, I'm safe. To tell me that this flight will be okay. God, I want to be loved. And I don't know if this is even possible, because in 23 years, no one's noticed me. I have a hard time believing anyone will ever fill this seat. But God, with the little bit of faith I have left, I believe in you. All things are possible, and I know you can do it if it's your will. Please comfort me. I didn't realize the significance of this moment until much later. The rest of the year went on. Nothing improved, no prospects, and I wasn't satisfied. I became more of a person I didn't like, and my senior day summed it all up. I stepped into the competition, and in track, you get 3 throws, and then you make it to the final round, where you get 3 more. If you step over the line, you're disqualified. So I threw my first one, and I fell over the line. Didn't count. Meanwhile, I hear the announcer, and all 18 of my teammates, except for me, walk onto the field to be recognized. They read their names, they talk about what they've done in their time there. The crowd cheers and they get their pictures taken with coaches. And while I'm supposed to be in this competition thinking about what I'm gonna do next, all I can think about is how I don't belong here. And I'm not loved. My teammates are recognized, and I'm alone. Needless to say, the next 2 throws, I fouled. And I ended up sitting on the bench, watching everyone else finish the competition because I was disqualified. At the end of the day, I walked over to thank my family for being there, and I couldn't hold back the tears. It had been a really hard year. Come the end of the year, come the end of the season, everyone looking on would have thought that life was perfect. But deep down, I was really dissatisfied. I wanted to be fulfilled. I wanted to be loved. And the worst part was, the year was over, and I was headed back to Baton Rouge. When I landed in Baton Rouge, my first week there, I got plugged into a church. God brought me back to his heart that year, and the first week I got an email about the pastor of the church. I'd never been there before, but it asked us to go help them paint their house. They had been flooded out of their house 1 year earlier when I left the city, and they hadn't moved back in since. They ripped up the drywall, they repaired everything, repainted the walls, and now we needed to go in and help them do that so that they could finally move back in. Thinking, I don't know these people, and honestly having a really selfish heart from the year I'd just gone through, I thought, I'm not going. There's no way. Something told me to go. So I got in the car and I drove there. On the way there, I got lost, and 3 times I thought about turning around. I didn't even know where they lived, and it was dark. I didn't know the city, and I only knew one girl that was gonna be there. But I turned down one last driveway, and about a quarter mile down the street, I pulled up to a house. I walked in the house, grabbed a paintbrush, and started painting the front room. During that time, I met the family. First, I met the kids, and I was hooked. They were so sweet. It reminded me of all the days I'd babysat kids before. And after that night, they invited me to share a meal with them the next week. So I went over to their house, and I'll never forget, at the end of the night, my pastor, Donnie, looked at me, and he said, Jenny, you know we love you because of who you are, not because of what you've done. And those have been the words I had been striving to hear for a whole entire year. In that moment, everything just began to break off. And I realized that this was going to be a place of healing. They helped me plug in, and I joined a discipleship program where I met every single week. And 2 weeks in, I started processing through the year that I'd just gone through. They tested me, and they said, let's figure this out. Ask God the hard questions. He can handle it. So I said, God, why was last year so bad? Why didn't you let me succeed? And through a lot of processing, I felt him say, Jenny, I loved you too much to let you have that success because I knew it was never going to fulfill you. Like everything else, if you succeeded in that, you would have kept striving for the next thing. And I was really touched. It made sense. It took time to digest, but thinking back on it, it was right. My whole life, everything was about the next big thing to make me feel a little bit better. So then I asked him the really hard question. I said, God, why has no man ever noticed me? Why have I never been loved? And he said, Jenny, I loved you too much to let you think that that was going to fulfill you. He had to bring me through this season. He had to bring me through this deep brokenness. And in the midst of this, that same night in discipleship school, a song played. And this song encapsulated everything that I felt. It said, all these pieces broken and scattered, in mercy gathered, mended and whole, empty-handed, but not forsaken. I've been set free. That's how I felt. My life had been broken. I had chased after success. I had chased after the approval of other people. I chased after all these things. And what I realized that night is I wasn't searching for a man to love me. I was searching for the world's permission to love myself. And I needed to look at my life and be proud of the reasons that I was different. I needed to own who I was. And from that moment on, everything changed. God used that place and that family to heal my heart. And ultimately, ushered me into the next season. 2 weeks later, my best friend got married. I went to the wedding, and this time it was different. Instead of worrying about what everyone else thought, or who was going to be there, or if a boy thought I was cute, all I could think about was how happy I was. I put on the dress, and for the first time in my life, I felt beautiful. The wedding went on, and I sent my mom a picture of the wedding party. I wanted her to see how beautiful I felt. She responded with a text, and she said, "Who's that groomsman?" I wasn't thinking anything of it, and so I immediately said, "Oh, nothing." Anyway, we got to dinner, and that groomsman in the picture, I sat next to. We were paired together, so naturally, we walked in together, sat down, and started talking. And I had a flashback to 9th grade. We're at a dance and a wedding. What should I talk about? As you can guess, the first thing out of my mouth was a mathematical equation. I told him about what I did. I geeked out on chemical engineering. I told him about the reaction we were thinking about and the new process equipment we were lining up in the field. Great strategy, right? This time, I was completely me. I was nerdy, I was dorky, and I wasn't concerned one bit what he thought. We talked for a really, really long time, and it was so fun. And then it got time for the dancing. I got up, danced with all the other girls, and I just remember letting my hair down and feeling free, finally free. I wasn't worried, I wasn't weighed down, I wasn't broken anymore. 2 songs in, I felt a tap on my shoulder. You guessed it. It was the groomsman. He said, "May I have this dance?" And needless to say, we danced all evening. I've never had so much fun, and I've never felt so safe. By the end of the night, I laid my head down on his chest, closed my eyes, something that was completely uncharacteristic of me. And every time we'd turn to where my back was facing the crowd, I'd quickly pick my head up as if no one would see. After the night was over, he was driving a couple people to the airport the next day. And so, being incredibly kind, he offered me a ride. I took him up on it, and at the airport, I hugged him goodbye, just like everyone else. And I thought, man, thanks, God. I really needed that. And I'm sure it's the last time I'll see him, but that was really special. Best night of my life. When I landed in Baton Rouge, the city where I said I would never find my husband, he made sure I made it home okay. And after talking about the standard deviation of how much fun we had the night before, he said, I've been dying to ask you this. Would you be interested in dating me? And in my heart, I was so nervous. I was 23. I'd never been asked on a date. I'd never had a boyfriend. What do I do? Oh my gosh. And thinking through it, I thought, what's been the only thing that I've been with him? Me. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna be vulnerable. So I told him, I said, I'm really thankful you asked, and honestly, it means a lot to me, because no one's ever asked me before. But I don't know you yet. And so if it's all right with you, I'd like to get to know you a little bit better first. And he responded with the biggest heart in the world. And he said, take all the time you need. In the weeks that followed, we talked every single night. I'd get off of work, excited about my distillation column, and call him first thing. And after talking for 6 hours every night, I realized he was exactly like my brother. And he loved me. He loved me so deeply. 4 weeks in, he asked if he could come take me on my first date. And still nervous about this whole label thing. It would be the first date ever. That's a lot of pressure when you're 23. But considering he was going to drive 20 hours round trip, I agreed. And because he lived close to my family, he took my mom out for dinner first. So he drove 20 hours that weekend, asked if he could be my girlfriend, nervous about the title.
Boyfriend.
Yes. Thank you. Asked if I would be his girlfriend. And nervous about the title, I responded with, I don't know if I can call you my boyfriend, but I want to be mutually exclusive, going on dates, pursuing marriage. He was a trooper. After that, we got closer and closer, started officially dating, and it was the greatest healing process. Because he didn't enter my life when I was perfect. He didn't enter when everything was all put together. He entered when I was figuring it out, and he loved me because of who I was, not because of what I did. About half a year later, we got a call that he was officially going on deployment. And while I struggled up until that point, not knowing if this was marriage or not, the day he left, I realized what love is. Love is unconditional, and love is something that sometimes you don't realize fully until it's fragile, until they're halfway across the world, and you're praying that they come home because you don't know how you'd live without them. And in that moment, I knew that I was going to marry this man. the greatest blessing of my whole entire life. This whole time, my story had been redeemed. God stepped in and brought blessings. In that time, my lease was up and I had a couple more months before coming to GSB. And in Louisiana, the room that I painted in my pastor's house, I walked into with all of my bags, set them down, and moved in. The very room I had painted a year before starting this healing process became my room. The very city I said I would never find a husband in was the city I lived in when I met him. And ultimately I realized that God had fulfilled prayers. In 2007, I prayed the first person I dated would be my husband, 10 years before we met. In 2010, I told my brother I wanted to marry someone just like him, 7 years before we met. In 2013, I prayed God would bring him into my life through a dance, 4 years before we met. On the day we met, I noticed when he asked me to dance. In 2014, I sat in the exact seat he flies in his airplane every single day. 3 years before we met. In 2016, I prayed for a man to comfort me when flying, 1 year before we met. And a couple months later, when we flew for the first time together, his flight got rerouted by 8 hours. He missed the connection completely, and we both got rescheduled to fly into the exact airport that I was flying to when I prayed that prayer. On September 9th, 2017, I sent my mom a picture of the wedding party, and she picked him out first thing, the day we met. If there's one thing I could leave you with, it's this. Love is unconditional. It doesn't matter who you feel like you are or what you feel like you've done. It doesn't matter if you're perfect or if you're broken, because truth is we're all broken. It just matters who's in it with you. And the day that Nathan stepped into my life was the biggest blessing that I've ever had. And I'm forever gonna be a better woman and a different woman because of him. And love covers all things. It was worth every day of waiting from age 13 to 23. And I've never been more thankful to have a man by my side through anything. God stepped into my life, and he fixed me when I was broken and striving for success. And after I found my fulfillment in him, he gave me every single blessing that I had ever prayed for. So as you're thinking about your story and your struggles and everything that comes along with it, don't try to be like the world. Don't try to fit in when you were born to stand out. Thank you. From my story especially, and just having so many seasons where it looked really good from the outside, but inside I was hurting, we're just praying that in every interaction, we would come in and surround people And no matter what walk of life they're in, no matter what they believe, no matter what's different about us, I just want people in our presence to know that we are for them, and that we are with them, and that we love them. Yeah.
How was the proposal?
I skipped that part. Oh, so this is just really true to the man that Nathan is. For the proposal, he knew for me that the way I feel loved is through words and through time with people. And so after finishing finals here at GSB, I flew to Ohio, his hometown, and as soon as I landed, we, interacted with his family, and a few days in, he brought me a little card in the morning, and I opened it up and sent me on a scavenger hunt. And that day, I went to 5 different places to spend time with the 5 people that mean the most in his life, and each one of them would give me a handwritten letter, and we did an activity that meant the most to them. And at the end of the day, he was the last stop, and he got down on one knee and asked me to marry him.
Where can I find my Nathan?
So we have, our first dance is going to be to a song that we heard on our first date. Our first date, he took me to a concert, and one of the songs that they played, some of the lyrics go through, and it talks about being fully known and fully loved. And so that's going to be our song, both from that first time and really just from the way that he's stepped into my life and embraced all of me and known all of me and loved it.